I want to know, out of everybody who clicked onto this video, how many of you have heard the beginning of One Piece is bad or something along those lines, right? It takes like 300 episodes, 700 episodes, the things that people say all the time on social media, right? So I wanted to, as a One Piece connoisseur, I would say, I even got the Pikachu. That's volume 105. I have like 2 side series. I even have the card game. My deck's over there. But anyways, I wanted to prove that the beginning of One Piece is still great and should be watched very much and not skipped, right? Because I don't want people skipping one of the best parts of the story. Now, I will go ahead and give a disclaimer, okay? 1, the animation is going to be worse than the standard now. That's just a fact of life, right? The endless marching of time, it destroys all, and animation very much so. Because if you look at like Egghead, where we're at right now, and then you look at just a fight scene that happens in old One Piece, my God, is it night and day. It is rough to get through. Also, the pacing. Yes, I know the pacing is not that great in the beginning of One Piece. It is notoriously bad. But, I mean, that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles with these old shonens. Naruto has it. Bleach has it. Bleach has it really rough because of all the filler. Dragon Ball had it probably the worst, which it was like that 19-episode Frieza fight, if anybody remembers that. It was a rough one. So, without further ado, I'm going to go through, and maybe I'll drop some facts that you didn't even know about One Piece while you were going through it. So, for the beginning, you got Romance Dawn. Also known as the arc where you meet Luffy and Zoro, because that's essentially the main things that happen. You're not really looking for super detailed antagonists within the beginning setup, because you're kind of still trying to get people accustomed to your characters, you know, dip their toes in the water, so to speak. And so it's just not really worth making a super complex villain that's just going to kind of divide your audience's attention before they understand really what you're getting at. So I think it's set up very well. I think the hook is very nice with Luffy's backstory or meeting Zoro, whichever one you want to say. Me personally, it was when I met Zoro, because I thought 3 swords was freaking crazy. Anybody else try to put the 3rd sword in your mouth and then realize it's just not as cool as when he does it. And then you try to do onigiri and then you hit it on the wall and your teeth feel like they're about to break. That was my experience. And I did it with a wooden sword too, so I didn't even get the full metal effect, which I guess would be heavier, right? Because a metal sword's got to be heavier than a wooden one, right? Totally. So I think it does a great job hooking you. I think it sets up the premise of being, you know, Pirate King, the Devil Fruits, right? Shanks as a great mechanism for world building, right? Here's one of the best pirates, and ooh, this is how it relates to Luffy. He really took one for the team also because he lost his arm, which I'm going to be honest, maybe it was all part of his master plan, but like, I still think back about that and be like, did he really have to lose his arm? I mean, let's all be honest. Because if you see what Shanks does now in the story, you're kind of like, and you lost it to a random, like, sea monster. That's where you lost the arm to, not these ginormous, strong individuals who will shake the very earth. You lost it to a random sea monster where Luffy lives. A little bit funny, admittedly, but you know, I don't question it. So I think overall, you got to give the beginning 3 points. It's great. Luffy's a wonderful main character, shonen protagonist, very typical of them, and I don't think it gets the bonus point for like 4 out of 3, just because it's not like that much of a revolutionary opening. If we're gonna be real, right? It's essentially just a stock standard shonen anime opener. But you also got to realize that that's still very good. Like, if that style of opening was not good, then you would not be seeing, like, My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, Hunter x Hunter. You would not be seeing all the other ones that spawn after the fact if the opener of, I want to be king of X, if I want to be the best at X, right? The type of I have a dream characters. Yeah, if they weren't very good, then you wouldn't be seeing as many of the style. If that makes sense. So I think the beginning is an easy 3 out of 3. And also, fun fact in the beginning, right? So there's a scene where the door, like when Higuma, the bandit dude, breaks it down, he like breaks the bar door, right? And then later on, a chapter around 900-ish, you find this master builder in Wano, right? And it turns out that he's the same guy who magically repaired this door frame, because in one scene the bandit guy broke down the door, and then the next the door was back up. And so he got asked about this in an SBS Oda did, and he said, "Oh, dude, it was this amazing legendary builder who fixed it," and he drew a quick sketch, and then that guy appears later in Wano. So, you know, fun fact. Cool stuff. I always like that one because it's like, dude, 900 episodes of foreshadowing. Now, we're going to get into characters. We're going to start with the main character, Luffy, right? He's absolutely wonderful in his simplicity, straightforwardness, and devotion, really, to his goal, right? Pirate King, friends, accomplishing all their dreams, sort of, what would you say, inspiring them, I guess, to take up the torch that they abandoned and go back in the fight with their dreams. Something like Sanji, where he wants to go find the All Blue, then he kind of gives up for a bit, and then he meets Luffy, and they kind of have that really nice connection with each other, where they both have dreams that people have laughed at, and he didn't laugh at Sanji's, and Sanji didn't laugh at his, so that was a very nice connection. Also, Zoro, right? And Luffy, you got this level of loyalty and respect that you really just do not find in any other crew member, and is actually baffling. Like, such a good right-hand man Zoro is. You got his relationship with Nami, which is what I can only describe as, like, almost a sibling-like relationship, where Luffy just completely pesters her every step of the way. Not really intentionally, it's just him being who he is, but Nami will just put him in his place and punch him in the head all the time. It's funny. And then Usopp, you got essentially the brothers, right? They're always up to their antics, and that's the crew you've got in East Blue, and I think Luffy's interactions with all of them are wonderful. They elevate the characters. And also, Luffy's one of those main characters where once you get accustomed to how he functions, you don't really need to be explained all the time about why he's doing what he's doing, because it's such a simple thought process that you're like, of course Luffy would do that, right? Which I really enjoy. It's the same kind of trick with, like, who's another person? Kind of like Gon and Hunter x Hunter. Eventually, after going through maybe the first arc with Gon, you're kind of like, oh, I understand how he's going to function without the story really telling me anymore. So I think, without further ado, I think Luffy deserves the 3 out of 2. And you might be wondering, oh, why did you give him a 3 out of 2? Why'd you give him the bonus point, right? I think if you didn't have Arlong Park existing, and the kind of climax of his relationship with Nami and him putting the hat on Nami, that he would just be a 2 out of 2. He would be a great main character, fun to watch, but I think that arc elevates him to such a level in such a short amount of time that very few other main characters can replicate. As for antagonists, I'm going to be honest, Arlong and Smoker do a lot of heavy lifting for this category. And you could bring up the point of, oh, what about Buggy, right? But Buggy doesn't really, because the live action made him super interesting from the get-go, right? But in the anime and the actual manga, Buggy isn't ridiculously interesting until later, when he keeps popping up all the time, right? That's where you kind of get this Team Rocket villain almost, like Eggman Bowser type, where he's like constantly there and he's like not really a threat, but you still kind of root for him in his own way, because he gets simultaneously the best and the worst of whatever situation he has at the moment. So I'm going to say later he becomes absolute god tier character, but right now I think he's pretty good. His backstory with Shanks is very neat for world building purposes, the connection, the fact that he was on Gold Roger's crew. His fruit is maybe the most interesting fruit in early One Piece by far. The Chop Chop fruit is hilariously fun, and how they defeat him is also very kind of on the nose, so to speak, you know, clown joke, but I don't think he's insanely crazy. I think Smoker proves a lot about the Navy, because we kind of think the Navy's like a joke after Morgan, and after the Arlong Park with the Weasel guy who just kind of like betrays Nami. But then Smoker proves to us that, hey, I can freaking put you into the ground, and it's not even that hard for me to do, because I have an overpowered devil fruit at the moment. Later, you know, things happen. And as for Arlong, he is the apex of the story in early East Blue Saga. He is the villain you hate. He has an insanely good motive. He has such good character writing. Like his conversations, especially when he betrays Nami later, where it was because she didn't find the loophole of what he had said. I love those types of villains. Very good. all around, and he challenges Luffy in a way that nobody else has really challenged him up to this point, because he actually had to give it everything he could possibly do to beat Arlong. There was no move left after his fight with Arlong, and I quite enjoy those types of villains where they actually test the main character, what it means to be a crewmate, what it means to actually care about someone else, stuff like that. So Luffy's all right, and also the moment where he puts Arlong's teeth into him and then bites him with his, it's very funny. I love that scene so much, dude. It's so good. It's like the ultimate BM, right? Like, if Luffy was a gamer, he'd be an insane BMer. But I don't think he'd actually mean to, is the crazy part about it. I think he'd just be, coincidentally doing it. He would almost be like a Yasuo main who's, God tier, but he's not realizing that he's just, stomping everyone the entire time. And then he gets, shut down 3 times, and then you lose the game. But I think those antagonists are phenomenal, pretty good. Buggy's good right now, but he gets way better later. And I think Alvida, Morgan, Don Krieg, and Kuro, they accomplish what you want for, purposeful antagonists within the arc, within Romance Dawn's type stuff with Alvida and Morgan. They don't have to be complex because you're trying to get the characters across. You're not trying to get these villains across really until Arlong and Smoker, and then Buggy does a little thing. But, I think they fulfill their purpose. I don't think they're bad, necessarily. So, I think overall antagonists are a 2 out of 2. I don't think you could really question that. As for side characters, you got the Straw Hats, you got Nami, Usopp, Zoro, Sanji, and that's it at this point, right? And I think the main moments for them is Nami's whole, help me moment with Luffy and Arlong Park, which is a deep level of character interaction you don't get to see with a lot of stories that early into their game, right? Which is why I also think that people who say early One Piece is bad or doesn't get good, have you seen the level of character writing? And also, we'll get to world building, which is just an insanely good category for it, but the level of character writing, even in the beginning, is so good, especially with the Straw Hats. And once you get to Arlong, he's just such a good pinnacle antagonist for the saga. It's wonderful. I love it. Now, I will say, also, so you have, Nami's great, the Straw Hats are great, obviously, but I think Kobe is just mad annoying at the beginning. And I think that's probably what people dropped the series for more than anything else, is because you're introduced to Luffy off the bat, which is great, and then you're introduced to Kobe. And Kobe is maybe the most annoying character in the beginning, because all he does is just kind of whine, overreact, doesn't really do anything, is kind of dumb also, so I don't know. I don't really like him at the beginning either. I like his progression, and for what it means for him to start it as that, and then he becomes this competent individual, this Marine who's trying to guide his own organization. I think that's cool. But I think at the beginning he is overdone. One annoying character does not set back the rest of the side characters, because you have good villager characters, right? There aren't just mouthpieces to talk through. You have interesting stories within the villages that make them feel real, and I like that for side characters. Also, Sanji's moment with Luffy where they're talking about the All Blue and Pirate King, and he wants him to be on the crew. I really enjoy that type of character writing. And you could also just talk about freaking Mihawk. What a goated character, Shanks, right? And those are so interesting as hook characters to be here's this insanely powerful person, they just slice the ship in half, go. And you're what the actual heck? And then Zoro's I'm going to win this fight. And you're dear God, is he? I don't know. But I think that's just a testament to how good the character writing is. And I think it gets an easy 3 out of 2 for side characters. It's just so good. I don't know how he does it with character writing. It's always just on point. But then we get to the story, and here's what I'll say. I think people will, say, oh, it's not as good as other parts. It's not as good as Alabasta. It's not as good as Dressrosa, Whole Cake, Wano, which just happened. They'll probably say something like Water 7, Marineford. And that's all valid, right? I'm not here to say that the beginning of One Piece is the best part of the story. No, I'm not here to say that at all. I'm here to say that I think it's good. I just think the other stuff is so freaking amazing and insanely well written that other people then think they have to lower the rating on the beginning just to justify the good score they gave the other ones, where they could just give good scores across the board. And that's what I think with this. It's set up story. It's not meant to be graded as if it's some grand scale season finale classic battle. I mean, Arlong is, but nothing else is the meaning of life and death type of stuff with that. And it's just really good setup, world building, character writing, because this is going to be a long series. You're going to be with these characters for thousands of episodes, right? Well, not really thousands, over 1,000 episodes. And so you kind of got to get to know them at the beginning. You can't really rush that because you don't want them to feel like hastily put together and forced conversation. So you kind of have to make them move at their own pace, right? And I think that's where people get thrown off in the beginning, is because there's not huge, insane set pieces until like way later. But I still think the story overall is great, and I think the fact that it ends at Logtown, which is where Roger ended his journey, and it marks the beginning of Luffy's onto the Grand Line, is just beautiful. Insanely good callback, because you will hear the goddamn thing at the beginning of every episode where it's like, Wolf and Power, Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, and then you hear it every time. So for them to end East Blue Saga in Logtown, very good, right? I think it's just overall a wonderful story because it's great setup for the rest of the 1,000 episodes that you will be watching. So without ado, 4 out of 4 on the story. I think it's peak, it's great. I don't think it gets a 5 just because, I mean, it is not that revolutionary story, right? Setup is very hard to make revolutionary, and that's just a fact of life. So I think it deserves the full. Anyways, world building, right? We can talk about a lot. We can go different islands, right? All unique in their own way. We can talk about fruits. There's 3 types: Paramecia, Logia, Zone, right? You can go into even deeper, all the different fruits. Luffy's got Gum Gum. There's Chop Chop. There's the, what is Smoker's called? Is it the smoke? I know it's his ability is smoke, but is it like the Plume fruit? A Plume fruit! I was right! I was right. That's all that matters. Okay, thank God I was right. I don't really say the Japanese names that much, except for like Gomu, because I think that one's funny. But other than that, I mean, you got tons of fruits. You got the greatest swordsman, so you have this kind of like sword society in One Piece, which I always thought was interesting, that they even graded the swords as well. There's different actual ranks of how high a sword can be, as well as a swordsman. Who the greatest is obviously Mihawk, who blew up a ship with one swing and came in on a coffin, just kind of a baller pose. Also, because didn't he come in like this or something? And then he has just like the giant cross sword on his back, and he goes like, haha, and then freaking donks him, and then just, it was the ultimate baller like intro. It was so good, and I loved it, and I think everybody loved it. And, you know, I wish we got to see more of them, but that's not the point. The All Blue, another interesting thing. Baratier, like the restaurant and the sea type stuff. I really enjoyed the fact that the Baratier even exists, because then I just keep thinking about, like, but what if they had, like, fast food chains, but in One Piece, and it was just out in the ocean? Like, would that not be interesting? Is nobody else fascinated by that? Because the Baratier exists, so there's already a model for it. But I don't know, maybe that's what Sanji will do at the end of One Piece, is he'll go back after he finds the All Blue, right? Which, you know, you can theorize wherever you think the All Blue is, right? And I could do a video on that later, but I think then he could go back to the Baratier and be like, hey guys, let's make this a franchise empire. And Zeph would be like, maybe you're on to something. Or maybe he would completely shut down the idea, who knows? Zeph, he might just not like that. But I think it's insanely well written from a world building perspective, because it's just so vast without really feeling overwhelming at any point. Also, if you don't even want to like talk about all the different kind of concept wise, you've got the structure. So you have the entire ranks of the Marines, the Navy, right, explained with Smoker. You have sort of the higher echelon of pirates explained with like Shanks. You have the swordsman thing with Mihawk. And you also just have the revolutionary setup with Dragon and his introduction, so I just think it's all really well done, and I think the world building deserves a 5 out of 4. I will say it. I think it's just a fascinating world to delve into, and there's so much to it that you couldn't give it anything other than a 5 out of 4, even at this point, right? As for the ending, It's a great callback to Roger, as I've said before. It's fascinating. And it's foreshadowing kind of the Grand Line in a way with like Don Krieg and his fleet being destroyed. So you're like, oh dang, how crazy is this Grand Line place going to be once we get to, you know, Reverse Mountain, and then we go out the whole thing with Reverse Mountain. But I think it's just really well done. I think Dragon creates some interest, right, when he goes in there and stops Luffy from dying. Smoker creates interest because you're like, how do we defeat this ridiculously powerful guy? And overall, I think this kind of stories, right? I think the story's slow start that everybody says is so much more grand than the average story in so many different ways. And I think the only reason people say it's a slow start is because they get kind of inflated with all the stuff that's happening later on in the series. And then they're like, oh, well, because this is so good, then the beginning has to be lower as a result. Whereas I think if you just take a step back and look at the story of One Piece at the beginning of East Blue, you'll realize that is incredibly iconic and definitely worth the watch at any point. And I think that's why the live action did so amazingly well as well, right? Because it was that story for the most part. Sure, they cut some stuff, sure, they changed some stuff to make it better for a live action audience, but it was still essentially the exact same story. And the fact that it did so well on Netflix that it outperformed Wednesday and Stranger Things and all this different stuff and generated so much popularity for the series that they're doing all these different projects for it now on Netflix, I think you can't give it anything other than the 3 out of 3 for the ending category. Now, with that being said, the final score is a 23 out of 20. I think it is very well deserved. So, with that, we'll see you in the next one. Oh, also, fun fact, right? Some of you may already know this, but Sanji's name was actually not supposed to be Sanji, right? It was supposed to be Naruto, but the guy who made Naruto came out with his series right around the time I think One Piece was getting to Baratie, and Oda was like, oh frick, now I can't call it Naruto. So he's like, I'll just call it Sanji. Which then, another fun thing, right? Went so well for the later arcs with like Whole Cake, where he could do the Niji, Ichi, and or Ichiji and like Yonji and stuff like that, and Reiju, where it all kind of followed the pattern of numbers, right? And I just think that's fun. I just think that's incredibly fun because it did spawn out of kind of like a last minute, ooh, we gotta change the name. And then he kind of rolled with it and made it work in a very interesting way with like Power Rangers stuff later in Whole Cake. So overall, phenomenal, without a doubt. And the first episode first opening is a banger, and nobody can doubt it. And I'll see you in the next one. Adios.